So do you think that it's a good thing that Trump is out, even if all the stuff that they were saying about him was probably not true, like Russiagate was all overblown and a hoax and all that stuff? If the media, the media focused on all these things that were nonsense stories, but then they won't even touch the stories that are very similar about the politicians on the left, the energy around everybody has been so negative over the last couple of years that do you think that maybe with Trump gone, the energy will shift and it won't be so divisive and negative online anymore? Or do you think it's just going to get worse?
The very nature of politics is you have to have an enemy. That's the very nature of the Machiavellian model they've created. So no matter what, you have to paint an enemy and do whatever you can to dehumanize a group of people, because when you dehumanize a group of people, you don't have any empathy or emotional connection towards them. This is classical playbook. It's been going on for centuries. And so, and it's going to get worse and worse. The masters of our times are the AI engineers who control social media, who put certain ads and content in front of you to manipulate your thoughts, subconsciously speaking. You don't even have to physically be clicking an ad or physically be clicking an article to read it. The very notion of seeing certain patterns of words, the very notions of seeing certain colors, and these patterns get ingrained in you. We as human beings, we recognize everything in patterns. This is how babies learn. This is how grand chess masters are the best at what they do. They don't play by one move at a time. They play by pattern blocks. They memorize all these different patterns that become very second nature towards them. And so it's, no matter what, I think if you look at history, and The Fourth Turning is a great book for this, and no matter what, when you have a centralized entity like a nation state, which is brand new experiment, very, very brand new experiment, eventually that centralized power erodes on itself. And so the time span, who knows, T plus 100 years, T plus 150 years, or 250 years, who knows? But the so-called American experiment of whatever it is or what it was trying to be, I think it's unraveling. And my thesis for the longest period of time is we are eventually going to slowly, but it's going to be a lot of turmoil. We are going to slowly be moving away from these centralized nation states, but it's not going to be a very, let's say, smooth transition.
Well, that's a long time away, though, right? That's like you're talking a long time for that to happen.
People have a misconception.
I want to know what the price of Bitcoin is going to be next year. That's what I'm concerned about.
If your time preference is 10 years, then it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whether it's Trump or Biden, it doesn't matter for the price of something like Bitcoin. Like both of them are going to print money.
People talk about the stock market. It's like, oh, if Trump's in power, stock market's going to rip, or if Biden's in power, stock market's going to dump. It's not the case. The Fed's in power. As long as the Fed remains the Fed, the United States government is at the mercy of the Fed.
It's true, but also like this round of stimulus was the quickest action that they've taken yet, and it was led by Trump. Like Trump got that stimulus passed really quickly and printed more money than any president has ever printed in history at one time at a record-breaking pace, like really quickly. And it was actually the Democrats that were like holding up the stimulus and stuff, because I don't know if it was because maybe they just wanted the political clout themselves. Like Trump went more socialist than the Democrats when the COVID crash hit. And I think it's maybe because he understands markets more, but all the value that they propped up, it doesn't help the average person on the street. It just keeps the pump going. It keeps the bubble going. All this phantom value that's in the stock market. The average American didn't get the benefit of all that money that was printed. It was like $18,000 per person went to corporations when, like, what was it, $1,500 went to the average American. So yeah, it's good for the stock market, but most people don't have stocks.
Okay, let's go back 4 years. You had Obama. Then who was before Obama? Bush, and then what was it, Clinton? Mm-hmm. Regardless of who's in power, two things happen with the government. Number one, more taxes are imposed on regular working class citizens. First unforeseen tax regular people really don't know about is inflation, right? This is the worst hidden, or shouldn't be hidden, but it's the worst form of tax that people have.
Yeah, and anybody who saves money, their money value is getting destroyed by these presidents printing money.
Yeah.
And the
So
Federal Reserve, like you said.
You have inflation, property tax. Even out here in Ontario, I call this as soon as COVID hit. I'm like, the first thing that's going to happen is property tax value is going to go up. That's because that's the easiest, fastest way for governments to start clawing back some type of tax revenue is through property tax. And historically, this has been accurate. So if you look at any countries around the world, property tax is the first thing they go after. And so regardless of who's power, who goes into power, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, the government grows. So they hire more bureaucrats. The actual employees of the government grow, and taxation grows. Now the taxation cuts, you think big multi-corporations that have billions of dollars in lobbyists around the world, like for them, they have the resources and means to be anywhere in the world. They're in Ireland for 1% corporate tax. They have IP licensing deals, or they switch different licenses and IPs from country to country. Like it really doesn't matter of what the government puts into play. Like they are the government. The lobbyists are the government. That what screwed up Washington, and not just Washington, Canada's exact same thing, is the fact that the lobbyists were allowed to pretty much do whatever they want. Like the lobbyists have completely manipulated and Frankensteined whatever last resemblance of a free market that we have. Like there is no more free market. It's impossible to compete. Like Amazon.
Yeah, man, that's crazy.
It's a joke, man. It's literally socialism.
And
for
that's
the
going
elites.
back, and it's going back to the status quo of. I heard Eric Weinstein talk about lobbyists and how Trump stopped seeing lobbyists all during his presidency, and that was actually positive because the lobbyists did take over, and Trump just stopped taking meetings with them. But then he said that it was actually not a good thing because Trump's closest circle became the lobbyists. Like they started getting paid all these deals. Maybe it was not Eric Weinstein, I don't remember, but it was somebody on a Joe Rogan podcast. They were talking about how the lobbyists started just going after like his closest circle, and then lobbyists eventually will always come into it. But with the Joe Biden presidency, that's just going to go back to business as normal, the status quo, the normal establishment. Washington politics is all about lobbyists and pork budgets and all this stuff. So they're going to spend money. Like President Trump, President Biden, they're both going to spend a ton of money. They're going to erode the value of the dollar by continuing to spend more and more and more money, increasing the national debt of the United States. But it seems like if Biden really does become president, which it kind of looks like that's going to happen, then it's not going to be too drastic because the Republicans are going to have more power. They're going to have more power in the Senate, or was it the House? One of them. They took one of them.
I'm pretty sure it's the House.
So they'll be able to have like. Go ahead.
The president can only do so much, right? He has veto powers for some amendments that he can do, but at the end of the day, it's the House that controls it. It has to bypass the House. The House has to vote it in.
Right. So the Democrats are going to have the presidency, but the Republicans are going to have the House, and then that will create kind of the same sort of stalemate situation that Trump was in for the first couple of years of his presidency, where he couldn't really get anything done except by executive order because they didn't want to do any of the proposals he was trying to push forward, like building the wall and ending Obamacare and all these things, these big projects he wanted to do. Couldn't get any of it done. Barely got the Supreme Court justice passed just recently. So it will seem like not much is going to change. They're just going to keep printing money, which they're going to keep trying to inflate the value of the stock market. They're going to keep trying to like keep the illusion going. It just almost feels to me, man, like there's going to be less divisiveness because there won't be a big agitator. Like Trump is really an agitator, whether you're on his side or not.
Listen, there's always going to be an scapegoat. There has to be.
But you remember in 2012 when like the Tea Party movement heated up, right? And they swept Congress or whatever, Senate. They got a bunch of these freedom sort of pro-freedom libertarian almost candidates in, and they were just doing massive rallies all over the place. That kind of died off after a couple of years. It felt like it anyways. I mean, it started with the Ron Paul movement in 2008, 2012, but then became the Tea Party movement. They did get a lot done, but then it didn't really seem like so I'm thinking all this anger and divisiveness that has bubbled up over the last few years because of the division between the social media on the left, the social media on the right, the mainstream news sources on the left and the right. With no Trump, I almost feel hopeful. Like, I feel like when you see how impactful independent media sources have become, like Joe Rogan, getting more viewers and more listeners than like Fox News and CNN, that's amazing. I love seeing stuff like that. Independent media is growing massively, and I think it's because people are sick of this hard left, hard right propaganda. So without this big agitator or this big enemy like Trump on the left or whoever on the right, when things go back to some kind of normal status quo, it almost feels like it'll be better because the independent media rose up out of this divisiveness, and they're going to have more power and more voice than ever before. And what is the Fox News and the CNNs and MSNBCs? What are they going to do? They'll have no Trump news anymore, so they're going to just slowly lose viewership and revenue because nobody's going to watch them anymore. Trump was their bread and butter for 4 years.
Oh, Trump was the best for their business.
Yeah, really, it was. And all these like clickbait articles and all this Russiagate stuff, like